What's going on, you guys? So something was brought to my attention pretty recently regarding ac+r and the history. Simply put, it was a clip from Sajam's stream. If you guys are familiar with Sajam, Sajam does a lot of YouTube content based around fighting games and streaming content based around fighting games. Since +r was a big thing over the weekend, someone brought this clip to my attention right here.
I feel like you can find information on why people didn't like 3S or what people liked about ST or different Capcom titles. So I don't know. You know what I mean? I feel like it's one of those things where it's slightly easier to find. But even then, those games aren't perfect either. It would be great if there was more history that was like, why did people not like, what was the reception of why people didn't like this game and that game and this game? Like, I don't know, if I was in my head, if you're like an old folk, this is like the perfect kind of thing to do, right? Because people would really appreciate that kind of insight, I think. Yeah, I agree. I think that kind of history would be really cool. Somebody just sitting down and being like, this is the reason why, blah, blah. Why don't I do it? I wasn't there. I can't give you a history of a game and community that I wasn't there.
So the real deal here is kind of want to settle the score, kind of clear the air about this topic. Basically, what was the big deal about +r and why people didn't like it versus vanilla AC and whatnot? So I'll start with myself, but before I do, I want to put out this quick disclaimer. What I'm saying does not reflect everyone in the community that plays Guilty Gear, from vanilla AC to ac+r. These are, things that I've heard from people that I know on a close basis, people who are close to me that say some of these things, and on top of my own personal feelings. So with that being said, let's start with me. Part of the reason why I personally felt some type of way about ac+r is because of this reason right here. And it's going to be a long-winded explanation, so hear me out. Basically, the biggest problem with +r isn't necessarily just the game in itself, it's the release schedule. Before Xrd Sign had first came out, that was December of 2014. Basically, they re-released ac+r Plus as +r, or basically they re-released ac+r as ac+r +r, and the +r balance was not featured on that version. The first version of that was released on Xbox 360, and there were all kinds of timing differences and stuff like that. Obviously, I adjusted, and this is around the time I believe Persona 4 Arena was pretty popular, so that's 2012, somewhere in that ballpark, right? And later on, they released a PS3 version. But again, it still wasn't +r. It wasn't the +r balance. It was still ac+r. Fast forward some time, ArcSys does all this advertising about, +r being released and stuff like that on top of Xrd. So basically, +r was going to be the game to hold us down before Xrd was released in December on console, because it was released in February, I believe it was exactly February 17th of 2014 is when the game first hit arcades. So there was a big lull time in between that, right? So all the advertising, all the riffraff about +r's coming, +r's coming. I believe there was a gumshoe or something like that one of the advertisements they showed online. It was the bottom of a Converse and a written date that was supposed to be when it was coming out. Sure, it came out on the Vita. It had to be the biggest slap to the face for the community and its players, including myself. And it's dude, how do you guys go all out of your way to do all this crazy promotion for +r, talk about all this and that and the other, and then, it's already out in the arcades in Japan, but we can't get a home port, and you've already given us ac+r +r, but it's not +r. Give us the update. It took them quite some time, and it wasn't up until pretty much, I think it was maybe somewhere 2013, I believe they re-released the Japanese version with the +r balance. So you had to import +r again. So people bought it on 360, people bought it on PS3. Hell, the game's even on the Wii, for that matter. But that's way back when, right? The bottom line is, it's most people who play Guilty Gear and main the series don't have a problem importing, but when the updated version is on the Japanese one, and we've already bought it twice between two already released consoles, and you want us to buy it again, and it's not even that us buying it again there. It's just, if you want to play that version, you have to spend a little extra to get that version. And like, not very many people really were okay with that. Not a lot of people were happy with that, including myself. And then lo and behold, maybe some months later, they released the American version, which is closer to the release of Xrd. And it's like, dude, why? So it's very infuriating for a lot of people. Some people just rolled along with it and didn't really care too much. Others were just kind of like me, like, why wait so long? So I ended up kind of like in the middle of the road, and that's where I think a lot of people kind of ended up. They were kind of like in the middle of the road where it was like, I'm not too happy about it, but I'll play it. And there's the other side of it. I'm not too happy, so I'll just chill because Xr's around the corner. So that was a big issue for a lot of people. And it starts there, right? Now, we've gotten through releases, right? The release schedule, stuff like that. You can do your own research if you'd like to go check it out and you see what I'm talking about. I'm not going to really provide all kinds of crazy stuff here in the video, but moving forward, now when we talk about the game, someone like myself, I guess in a sense, you get some people who are like Super Turbo heads. If you're not familiar with Street Fighter 2 Super Turbo, there was an updated version of the game called HD Remix that was made by David Sirlin and other people from Capcom with different sprites and all kinds of stuff like that, remixed, rebalanced, all kinds of stuff like that. And it was a kind of a awkward game for some of those people who were playing ST original. And it's sort of the same case here, right? Where it's been, I don't know, it's definitely been quite some time, because Accent Core was released in like 2007. And here we are with an update on console, like 2012, 2013, somewhere in that ballpark. I think it's somewhere around the time Persona Ultimax came out, I think is when it was officially released in the US, like the upgrade. Please feel free to do your research. Maybe I'm wrong about the time frame, but I'm sure it's somewhere in that ballpark, like 2013, late 2012, somewhere in that ballpark in between. There was a time when it was released. But moving forward, the balance was just so awkward, right? You have characters who are basically, actually, a lot of the characters in Plus R borrow moves from their EX versions, right? So from XX Midnight Carnival to Reload to Slash to original AC, there were always EX versions of the characters, right? And from the very first XX, they've had EX characters that had different moves, and each version they kept kind of rebalancing, retuning, taking things in and out, trying different things. Not to mention they had the gold and shadow characters that also had different properties, which they're not too far off, but they definitely were different characters from the main characters, right? So they borrowed so many moves and things like that from those versions and implemented them in Plus R with rebalancing, and some of them are still just as OP as they were previously, right? So they made it in part more like they added them as more like EX special moves, or they made different cancels. Like, for example, Soul could never do standing heavy slash into Fafnir in the older games, not even AC Vanilla, but in Plus R that's like a legit combo, slash far slash heavy slash Fafnir super cancel it or whatever, that was a thing. In fact, Soul didn't have a regular Fafnir and Accent Core Vanilla. It was a Force Break or EX move, so a lot of these moves ended up being EX moves, and a lot of the EX moves were kind of EX moves or Force Breaks in AC Vanilla were already pretty wild, and now Plus R is littered with like characters having 4 and 5 different Force Breaks, so it makes neutral a little awkward. It was already difficult enough in AC Vanilla, and now they threw all this extra EX moves type stuff, like biking triple tatami was pretty nutty. That was a move that she had as EX biking, if I recall right, and it's like, for me, playing AC coming up and then seeing all that new balance, it's like, ugh, this is kind of crazy, man. AC was already the Wild West, and now you're just kind of tacking onto it. The rebalancing of the characters, like take for example the bottom 3 was like Johnny, Dizzy, and like Bridget. Those characters got some pretty nice buffs. Anji, etc., etc. A lot of the characters who were weaker got some pretty cool buffs, and like it kind of balanced the game out a little bit more. Because yes, Vanilla AC definitely was some of the top tiers were pretty tough to beat, but the end game of that version was basically top 4 and everyone else. It didn't even matter anymore about A tier, B tier, C. None of that mattered. If your character was weak, no one cared at that point anymore. It's just the top 4 and those characters. Now the tiers are still sort of like the same, where it's like the top characters, and it's some of the top characters in the version are just pretty wild too, like Zappa. Zappa's never been top tier whatsoever in any of the older versions. He's had moments where he's been good, and sometimes it's kind of a good matchup for against certain characters, right? Not very many, but the bottom line is now this is the game where he gets to shine and do some pretty wild stuff. And I mean, the guy has unburstable full screen combos with the sword. It's kind of why, it kind of invalidates a lot of his other tools and stuff like that. So I guess at the end of the day, it's just some tools get invalidated because these characters have way more than what they had previously. And now, don't get me wrong, I know there's a lot of people who enjoy +R, and rightfully so. Those tools definitely make the characters more expansive, but I think there's also a lot of I don't know, I just think it's kind of crazy. But a lot of people like, how frantic it can be, and they like that wildness of that version. So, I would never condone anyone who enjoys playing it. Like I told you guys before, I'm in the middle of the pack when it comes to it. I'm neither against it, neither super duper for it. But I'll tell you for sure, I'm always happy to see more people playing Guilty Gear. So, yeah, I think that pretty much sums it up. There's more I could say on the history of it, but I think this kind of airs it out. As I said before, this doesn't reflect everybody in the community. The bottom line here is this is pretty much what the consensus was, and not everyone was happy, and not everyone was upset. It was just right down the middle, so I can say for sure, though, from the competitive side of it, I think, I guess in closing with that, what I can say is that had ArcSys did this right in the past, then I believe AC+R could have had a way more flourishing community back then when they were trying to release it before Xrd. I think that would have been really good. Obviously right now with the rollback implementation right now in this beta, which by the way was extended, this is a good look for Guilty Gear. I'm really glad to see a lot of people playing Guilty Gear, but we'll talk about that another time. At the end of the day, this is basically what it was. This is the history of why people liked it and why people didn't. So I'm going to go ahead and call it a day on this one. Didn't want to go too long here on it, but now you guys know the truth. So with that being said, I'll catch you guys in the next video. I'll provide links to Sajam's stream and whatnot. Be sure to check him out too. And yeah, have yourselves a good one. Stay safe in these COVID streets, all right? Deuces, gooses.